And there's no reportable action. Thank you.
Should we continue with regular meeting?
We need to adjourn the special meeting.
Adjourn.
And then, yeah.
Continue with public comment? Was it-
Need a motion?
No,
Motion to adjourn.
motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Where were we at now?
We're opening the regular.
Open the regular meeting now, so we're open the regular meeting. Do pledge allegiance again? No. Once enough? Okay. They did roll call. There was no board announcements?
No.
Nope. Department announcements? Any?
No.
Okay. Public comment? This gives anybody that wants to talk about any item that's not in the agenda 3 minutes if they wish to speak. You have any speakers? No problem. Okay, then. We close public comment. And then we go to the consent agenda.
I do have something to add to the consent agenda, where I noticed that some of the corrections and things that Anita and I had worked through to try to correct, to get the record accurate, had inadvertently been dropped here at the end. So I want to point your attention to, if you look on page 5 of 6 of the minutes, right above the word regular agenda, where the last statement is Commissioner Lowe made a motion of intent to approve and staff comes back with conditions of approval. I'm sorry, I made an error in that I didn't record who made the motion, which was Commissioner Lowe with Ray Pierce as the second, and the motion of intent passed 4-0 on that item. So I just accidentally dropped the action that you took at the end of that item. So I'd like to, we can either handwrite that in or acknowledge its presence in the minutes.
Mr. Chair, what if we don't approve the minutes tonight, and let's just get them straightened out and have them come back?
Could you please turn your microphone on?
I said, let's not approve the minutes tonight. We'll send them back to staff, let you correct the minutes, and bring them back at the next meeting. And then everybody knows exactly what we're approving.
So we have a motion on that?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, acknowledgement of public hearing?
Did you want a motion now on the consent calendar?
Oh, the calendar, yeah.
Yeah,
that's-
I moved we approve the consent calendar, the
Second.
continuation of the minutes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. So we go to public hearings. Okay. We got to open public hearing. Item number 2. Switch. Item number 2 is going to be pulled from the agenda tonight.
No, it's
No.
going to be continued.
Continue for
To
our
the
next meeting, so they can fine tune a lot of the
Correct.
errors that were found by both parties, my understanding. So it'll be continued to
So
our
you-
next
December
meeting,
5th.
December 5th,
6 p.m.
6 p.m. So,
So moved.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay,
They don't have to open the public on the continuance. I think they do.
so now we jump
Did you
to-
have public comment for the public hearing?
For the what?
Do you want to have the public comment for the public hearing, or do you
For-
want to just?
Not on the agenda.
No.
It's not, okay.
No. So now we go to discussions, I guess? Number 2?
Oh,
I can hear you.
Can I, you, because we're continuing, because the agenda item was ambiguous, and some people may not be here who wanted to be here, do you want to make a decision whether or not to allow people to speak twice at this meeting, at this hearing, and then for the next, are we moving on to number 3?
he ordered it. Yes.
He said item 2.
No, we're going to move into number 3.
Okay, so we'll just continue comment until
Comments,
next
yeah,
time. Okay.
Next time.
And point of order, before we start discussing the item, and this is the commercial regional nodes, there's one element, one node in there that actually was never part of the study area, part of the EIR for the general plan.
Actually, Mr. Chair, I'll actually talk about that as a part of my presentation.
But before you start, I'm going to talk too.
Okay.
I'll trade back and forth with you.
Okay.
So I'd like to actually have that pulled from discussion of the meeting, because it was never part of it. I'd like to isolate that one element, the 101 livestock area, and bring it off to the side, because separate action might have to occur in order to get that through, because it was never part of the commercial discussion or part of the general plan's study process. There was an indication in here that it was inadvertently removed, but it was never part of. The only one that was ever removed was 156 and 101. That was removed, that was approved, that was studied, but the commissioner from District 1 asked that it be removed. That was removed. 101 livestock was never a part of it. Only the flyover at the Red Barn was part of the study area. And I believe that's in here, and it's called Rocks Ranch. So legal, does that take a motion to do that, to separate these?
To separate the,
Or what's the recommendation of legal? Because if we start talking about that, as we're talking about all the other ones, there might be the assumption that they have all the vested rights that the rest of them do, and they may not. That, I think, needs more study.
Well, Mr. Chair, if I may, if I can start my presentation, and then we can get to Commissioner Pierce's question, because I think that it's probably easier to respond to that if I put it in a little more context for everybody that's here. So if that's okay. Because I think, Commissioner Pierce, I can answer your question, but we need to set it up a little bit first and provide a little bit of context to answer that. Because part of this process would be that the property owners for Livestock 101 would be proposing a general plan amendment on their piece of property. So
Okay.
first,
As
again,
long as
my name is Daryl Boyd, and I'm the county's project planner for this.
Okay, Daryl. So there's been enough misunderstandings in the past about what vested and what other things are and what they aren't. I just don't want to have another misunderstanding of another landowner thinking that they have more going on than they do.
Absolutely.
If you can present your presentation in that manner,
Absolutely.
I'm good with that.
Yeah, absolutely, Mr.
And I'm
Chair.
not against the project. I'm just saying legally we may not, with the EIR and the other study part of the general plan, we might be stepping in a pile here. We don't want to do that.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So
Through the chair, may I have a
Yes,
second?
go ahead.
Thank you. These concerns are exactly why we're here, as a check-in with the Planning Commission on a proposed amendment to the general plan maybe, and the implementation of a commercial node, an element of the general plan. And it's good practice to come to an appointed and elected body so that staff work and momentum that's to date, that we see that we're on course. So with the presentation today by our project by our project planner, to give a little context, we gladly want to make sure that we're on track with the vision of the Planning Commission as we move forward. And I agree with Mr. Boyd that being able to give his presentation and have an interaction with the board, with the Planning Commission, will be very fruitful to see that we're on the right track and that it represents the understanding you had with previous discussions.
And I am as well, as long as there's no misunderstandings. And by the way, Daryl, I like your tie.
Oh, thank you. It's orange for Halloween, in case I turn into a pumpkin.
Thank you, Chairman.
Go ahead, proceed with your
Okay.
presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair and members of the Commission. Again, Darrell Boyd, Project Planner. So tonight we're here to talk about the Commercial Regional Nodes Implementation Program. The Commercial Regional Nodes were adopted as a part of the General Plan update in 2015 for 2035. And as Tavin said, with regard to the first bullet point here, in terms of some supplemental comments that I will make, I've got a short presentation. We'll turn it over to EMC, who are consultants on this, and then they'll get into some more details. But as Tavin said, we're here tonight really as part of our due diligence to have an early conversation with the Commission about this project before we go away and really start, fine-tuning words and so forth. One of the issues that had come up, not just from Commissioner Pierce, but sort of a long debatable issue, has to do with the second bullet point here. So if you go to page 2 of your staff report under the GP, the General Plan heading, the third line there has this sentence that says that it should be noted that the figure, which is figure 3-5, would be revised to include a fourth node at Livestock 101 that was, the staff report says it was approved as a part of the general plan in 2035 and left off the diagram.
We don't have that in our staff report. I don't know where to direct. The staff report doesn't have bullets. Like, do you?
Page 2 of the staff report.
Page 2?
It's under general plan on page 2.
The heading on page 2.
2 of 4?
2 of 4.
Fourth line.
See, I don't have.
Oh, I see. You've got a different page number because of the packet number. My apologies.
I have a different, but there's no bullet points. No, I've got it, I think. Is that what yours looks like? Okay,
What's the page number?
sorry. I'm good now. Trying to
Well,
follow along.
So, for clarification for everybody, what page do you have? Just to make sure that the commissioners all found it. 204. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So on page 204, which is of your packet, which is page 2 of the staff report, there's a line in there that is not correct, and that's really what Commissioner Pierce is referring to, is that there had been some discussion and misunderstanding from the time that we started this project about what the status of the node at Livestock 101 really is. And I was wrong in what I put in the staff report. I spent 2 hours this morning listening to the Board of Supervisors discussion from 2015 when the general plan was adopted, and it's very clear, at least in my opinion, that that Livestock 101 was not included and was not. It wasn't a clerical error. That's the comment that's been made, was that there was a clerical error, and that's why it didn't show up on the land use, the general plan land use diagram as a node. But to the best of my knowledge, staff will keep doing some more digging and research, but based on watching the Board of Supervisors discussion and looking at all of the resolutions and printed material, the errata and so forth, I can't find anything where Livestock 101 was intended to be the fourth node. It's very clear that that the node that was shown at 101 and 156 was deleted, but there's no node that's designated on the general plan for Livestock 101. Now, we're here tonight as a. It's not a public hearing. This is a discussion with the Commission. We're not asking you to take any formal action. So one of the topics that the Commission can have tonight is about, the viability, I guess, or if you have thoughts about Livestock 101 being a fourth node. The process that we would undertake, that the applicant, the property owner, would need to undertake at this point, is a general plan amendment would need to be proposed to add a fourth dot to that site, and there would also need to be environmental review done as a part of that general plan amendment. And so there's nothing about the discussion tonight, at least from staff's opinion. Legal may think otherwise, but there's nothing that would preclude this discussion tonight, including Livestock 101.
So through the chair, though, does the discussion include since it was studied, the 156-101, will there be discussion about bringing that back in?
Only under two circumstances that I can think of right now off the top of my head. One would be if there were property owners out there that wanted to file a general plan amendment to do that, or I suppose secondly, if the planning commission was interested in initiating a general plan amendment to do that, you could do that or ask the board of supervisors to do that. But right now, as it stands, there's nobody advocating that come back, because it was clearly not included.
Because it was removed.
Yeah, it was
so they
removed.
don't think there's much
Right.
chance of it. So.
Right.
Okay.
Correct.
Just wanted to be clear on that, too.
Yes, correct. Because this isn't a public hearing tonight, we didn't need to formally notice it, but we did do courtesy notices to property owners within 300 feet of the 4 project sites that we're going to talk about tonight. And part of the reason for that is to just see if there are other people who are interested in their sites being included in the commercial regional node. The only comments that I got three comments, 3 calls from people proximate to Livestock 101 that had some concerns and questions about commercial uses expanding at Livestock 101. So I just want to make sure that you're aware of that. So in terms of the intended work products, I tried to distill this down to keep it somewhat simple, since I'm a simple-minded guy. So there's really four main work products that we've got. One is that because of the way the general plan was done, it basically just established these dots that are not precise on the land use diagram. And so part of our effort is to determine what the actual boundaries, what properties should actually be designated with the commercial regional designation. Now, the reason that's important is we need to know going forward to implement the general plan and to also find zoning conformance, what properties are included and which properties are not included within each node. Because then that way, in the future, if a property owner wanted to be designated commercial regional, they would know if they're in or out. So that's the reason for needing some way we have to identify in the general plan what are the properties that are within the node. One way would be to change the diagram. Another option would be just to have simply a list of properties, the parcels or something for each node that's included in the general plan. There's more than one way to do it. Secondly, is just what we were talking about, is that...
Carol?
Yes, sir.
As part of that parceling, can we have topo maps, too?
Yes, there would be.
Along with it? Yeah, because that could make a lot of difference.
Yes, there
Sorry
will be.
to-
Yep,
yeah.
absolutely. Yes, Mr. Chair, there will be. So secondly is what we were talking about earlier in response to Commissioner Pierce's question, is that there would need to be a general plan amendment proposed to add Livestock 101 as a 4th node. And it would have to go through the regular process. There's nothing predetermined about it. It would still have to go through the regular process, but it would need to be added. And then the real key part of this is creating what we're calling a C3 regional commercial zoning district. Right now in the zoning code, there's not a zoning district that really conforms or is consistent with the commercial regional general plan land use designation. And so we need to create a new zoning district. And that's really the true heart of the effort, is to create that zoning district. And then also as a part of this effort, we would then rezone certain properties, propose certain properties to be rezoned to apply that C3 regional commercial designation. And again, EMC, when they get up here, when Richard and Michael get up here, they'll give you more details about the land areas and so forth.
May I interject for just a second, Mr. Boyd, just to clarify on your last slide? If
Yeah.
you could go back one.
Yeah.
So part of this exercise, number 3 there, create the C3 Regional Commercial Zoning District. So that would be in the zoning code. And then additional properties later in the county that are seeking to become a regional commercial property and they wanted to change their own property to C3 would fall back to these standards. All right?
Correct.
So we're actually creating that, it's like we're creating R1, but we're creating C3, that someone could request an application of that to their property later. Number 4 is its particular application to these
To these properties.
subject
Yeah,
properties.
correct.
But actually,
Correct.
Overall, the county will have we'll have a tool and an implementation that can be used at times in the future.
Yeah, that's a good clarification, is the C3 wouldn't necessarily be limited to only these properties. It could be applied to others. Yes, good point. So I just want to point out for the commission and for the public that when you look at the general plan land use diagram, which is figure 3-2, right now it shows 4 dots. It still shows the dot at 101, 156. That's incorrect. So one of the pieces, one of the work products we will do as a part of this project is to fix that and clarify that. If you look at the commercial nodes, figure 3-5, that's actually correct because it shows the 3 nodes that are currently designated, and then there would be a general plan amendment to propose the 4th one, livestock 101.
Do you have a laser pointer that you could point
Oh,
out those
sure.
nodes? 'Cause
Yeah.
it's really hard to see.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Help me, let's see. I'll remember how to do this. Do you remember how to do this? Is it the control arrow?
Can't even find it on this map.
Tavin, do you remember how to get the little arrow pointer on the desktop, the laptop? I don't remember.
Thought it was a mouse.
Well, I don't have a mouse.
I have a pony.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Schiff.
Intersection here, there's 156 and this is 101,
Right.
56. And then this is commercial nodes. See, it was on the new study areas. That's a different map. It was still left in there by mistake.
Right. So that's the one that should not be there. Does that help? Is that what you needed?
And we're talking about 4 nodes now?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, so the next figure is actually correct. So there's the three red dots along 101. I apologize. I've been working with this so long, I just
It's only
think
3.
everybody
It's
knows where
Only
they're at.
3, because one was wrong.
But-
One is wrong.
Got it.
But along 101, there's 3 red dots. Those are the regional commercial nodes.
Also, to be noted that this is the flyover at the Red Barn, but right here at this turn, that would be the 101 livestock area.
Right.
What's the one way out?
Right. Thank you, Commissioner Pierce. So in terms of what we're doing tonight, again, this isn't a public hearing. We're here to try to get some early input from the commissioners, especially the 3 commissioners that were here when the general plan update was in process and adopted, just to see if they're, staff, we can read the words that are in the general plan and interpret what they mean, but sometimes there's other things that may not be there or need to be clarified or so forth. So that's really why we're here, is to seek this early input from the commission. And so then the next 4 bullets here are just examples of some of the questions that we would be interested in your take on, is that as EMC is going through the maps on the different properties, do they look right with the land that's being included? With regard to the new zoning district, are there uses that should be allowed or prohibited? There's also language in the general plan about design review, architectural styles. There's been discussion about the different nodes having different themes. One being, say, for vineyards and wines. Another one would be ranch and agriculture. Another one would be the farm products from San Benito County. And then lastly, there's also scenic corridor considerations that are raised in the general plan policies, and I know were also talked about over the course of the general plan update with regard to the nodes. So those are some of the things that we would be looking for you to weigh in on, not that you're limited to those. So unless are there any other questions for staff, Mr. Chair, before we turn it over to EMC?
Mr. Pierce, any questions?
Yeah.
You done?
Mr. Chair, did we address Commissioner Pierce's earlier concerns? I just want to make sure that we're
I just wanted to be very clear about that because there's too many misunderstandings.
Agreed.
People move forward, spend money, and they think they have something they don't.
right. A big part of our job as staff is to make sure there's good information. So, all right.
And let's
Chair.
just
Go ahead.
Mr. Boyd,
Yes, ma'am.
I understand also that the properties that are between these nodes, that if there is concern about changing their zoning, one of the things in the general plan is also that there not be like a string of commercial all the way along 101 through San Benito County. And so I think property owners do need to be aware that it's a matter of aesthetics, of the view shed, of the consistency of the historic 101 that they're going to be confronting. And so at this point, it would be good to consider what their options are.
Mr. Chair, I think that's a very important and good, valuable comment because I think what staff would say in response to that, what it makes me think of is that it is important to note that these nodes really are intended to be fairly, pretty discreet. Your Commissioner is absolutely right. There's not any intent to have a strip of commercial all along 101 continuously. So at some point, the county may be faced with discussions about, how much is too much at the nodes and so forth. So that's a really important point that was brought out, I think, both by the Planning Commission and the board when the general plan was adopted. That it's really important that it be fairly discrete nodes.
Through the chair, too, to address that. The scenic corridor idea that he had in the last page, that's basically in between the nodes. They sort of identified those as scenic corridors. So I'm glad you clarified that. It would be like just the node area would be the commercial area.
Right. And I think just to put a word in for the possibilities of the 101 auction, that's a historic site. That is there way more than 50 years. And so it needs special consideration in that it is attached to our agricultural and ranching community, and it is very reflective of the character of the county.
Is that the Red Barn that you're speaking of in Monterey
No,
County?
the 101 Stockyard.
101 Stockyard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the only issue with that really is access and egress. But they actually touch Cole Road because Cole was, shut down. So that could be a benefit.
All right.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Richard James, Principal of EMC Planning Group. Also with us tonight, Michael Groves, Senior Principal and President of the firm. As you may know, EMC Planning Group completed work on the general plan several years ago. We're the firm that took it over and carried it through to its completion. And we're now currently under contract with the County of San Benito to do this piece of implementation of the general plan in the commercial node zoning. So there on the first slide is a picture of the relatively new San Juan Road overpass that comes in right by the Red Barn. Let me get oriented here. There we go. Okay, so this map, of course, keeping in context of what's been said earlier, shows 4 node sites. One of those, of course, is the Livestock 101. But from north to south, you have the Bettabell Road where the existing RV park is, and then the Highway 129 intersection near the high school. Then the Livestock 101 is the third one coming from the south, or from the north rather. And then finally the Rocks Ranch, which is popularly known, of course, as the Red Barn, which is just over the line in Monterey County. So our task is to, create the boundaries for the zoning, because that would show up on the zoning map, and then also to write the text of the C3 code to back up that map and to give the uses, development standards, and so on for development under that code. So let's go back to the general plan vision. Daryl touched on this, I think, quite a bit, but kind of three key pieces that we took out of policy LU 5.3. The nodes would be located at or near highway interchanges, be subject to design review, which is considered very important, and contribute to the preservation of the scenic areas. Those last two bullet points are in recognition that 101 coming through San Benito County is quite a scenic drive, and I believe it's also designated as a scenic highway by Caltrans. And as is, I think 129 is also at least county designated as scenic, if not also state. So here's, okay, it just looks a little different than my printout. Here is an aerial photograph showing the four areas that we're considering. The Beta Bell Road up at the far north end, several miles before you hit the Santa Clara County line. Highway 129 node, which is, of course, where Highway 129 comes out of the canyon and hits 101. Skipping past Highway 156, and the next one we have is the site that is currently commercial but would require a general plan amendment, Livestock 101, and then finally the Rocks Ranch site, which abuts the county line right along the Monterey County-San Benito line. So the first task that we had was to define where would this code apply once it was written and adopted. And so we made site visits to each of these four areas that are under consideration in an attempt to decide what was the most appropriate real estate to include within the boundaries. Because while the general plan shows a dot, the zoning map is going to show a boundary, and you can identify as your piece of property in or out of that boundary. So we need to establish that line. So I'm going to go through each of those four nodes that we're considering and look at those. In general, we mapped it in advance before we went out. We tried to take out areas of obvious prime farmland and didn't consider including those in general. All of this is in general. We generally took out flood zones and riparian areas and generally took out steep slopes. Those aren't universal, but in general. So let me go starting at Beta Bell at the north.
Excuse me for a second. So define steep slopes, 30% or more?
I think the general plan or the zoning currently uses 15 or 30, depending on the context.
Okay.
We just eyed it and said, that's steep. We didn't measure it. And we also had also in our minds looking at this was, if you built on it, would you be able to preserve the scenic qualities? You know, there's certain places you certainly couldn't build and maintain a scenic quality. And this first site actually has a good example of that. Beta Bell, the Beta Bell site originally started out at 139, and for some reason that label is still on here. We took out all but 55 acres after visiting the site. Quite a bit of it's in the flood zone, the south and west part of it, up against where the river comes in and meets the Pajaro River. I guess that's the San Benito River confluence there. That's all prime farmland and in a flood zone. So we went out and looked at it. We took it off the map because we didn't think that was as appropriate as some of the other parts of this area. Going north, you have the existing RV park. We look north of that. It gets really narrow between the freeway and Beta Bell Road and the river. So we didn't consider that area. Now looking to the eastern side of 101, here we have steep slopes, and they come up pretty much straight up from the frontage road there. And did not look suitable for inclusion, so we eliminated those. So preserving the ag land near Highway 129, preserving the hillsides as open space were both important. Ultimately, we set this site back a bit from the floodplain and the riparian areas. Now I've got some photographs. Let's see, the first one is the southern part of what's included. So if you come off the freeway, across the freeway, head south along the frontage road, this is that piece of land there. And towards the back of the site, you can see the riparian vegetation. Behind that is the Pajaro River. There's an existing place that's kind of hard to characterize. They've sold trailers and various things out of there. It's got a couple of existing buildings. That's included. And there's, of course, the RV park, which appears to be pretty popular. It was full when we took a picture of it back in the spring. We went by and looked. So this site we're considering to encourage destination and highway services. The property owner on this site has some pretty clear ideas what they would like to do with it. And as was mentioned, there's going to be a theme, or that's the intent, is to have a theme for each of these sites. And tentatively, this one has been chosen as Vintage America, and kind of a roadside attraction theme. Okay, moving on to the next site at Highway 129. This one's unique in that it's got roads in between. It's not a solid block of land. Cerrell Road comes in and intersects with 129 right near the Highway 101 southbound on-ramp. Like I said, generally we excluded floodplain. You'll see there's a little bit of floodplain to the eastern side. I guess that's technically the northern side of 129. We kept that in. The yellow lines that run through that little piece, by the way, seem to be the old 129 right-of-way, and they seem to still be a right-of-way. We're doing some investigation on a few of these. We've got some questions on property lines and what's in a right-of-way and where the property lines actually sit. So we've got to do a little investigation on that as well. But for the sake of zoning, it probably doesn't matter that much at this point. So there's one area here that's a little bit of a hill. That's the area that's marked as 20.7 acres. That rises up higher than the rest. Envision that potentially a hotel of some sort could go up there, probably at a lower overall site coverage because it does have some slopes. There's a 2.5 acre parcel there that's nestled in between Cerrell Road and the on-ramp, and then some other land that rises somewhat moderately up from Cerrell Road. We looked at some of the parcels south of this, and there were some, existing homes and a small business and so on, kind of mixed in. There was kind of a business at your ranch kind of situation, and the slope seemed to get a little steeper as we went south along Cerrell Road, so we excluded those. This site is 40 acres as mapped right now. And, whoops. We did look to the east. And, of course, the high school's over there. There's a lot of farmland over there as well. We thought better to concentrate everything on one side, and we chose the west side. We thought that was a little more appropriate site-wise.
The quarry is over there, too. That gray area right across from your...
Right.
Did you look at that area at all? I mean, that part of that should be floodplain.
We didn't look back in there, no. Because there's farmland in between the road to San Juan Bautista and that. It's stuck in between.
Yeah, that's on the south side.
Yeah.
I was thinking on the north side, it'd be kind of nice to have something a little nicer looking than the quarry.
Yeah, there's a little patch of farmland too, but we could certainly consider looking at that as well. We're not opposed to, we're not looking at a point of zero farmland conversion or, that kind of thing. So we're open to looking at different options. Some photographs from the Highway 129 node. Of course, you probably know they set up trucks and little informal markets there along on the right-hand side as you're headed towards Watsonville. The second picture is looking at that little area I described as rising up a hill where there was thought from the property owner of potentially putting a hotel. And then the other one is showing part of the flood zone and some riparian, and there would have to be some setbacks from those as far as and restrictions on the type of uses that could go in those areas. This theme was tentatively considered to be the farm, and we encourage highway services and hospitality uses. And we get to Livestock 101.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, at the Bettable Road, Did you say how many acres that was?
Betabel is 55, despite what the map, on top of the map says 139, it's 55
Thank you.
and some change. So 55, 129 is 40 acres more or less. And then Livestock 101, the one that does not appear on the general plan map, currently used, of course, for livestock trading, transport, so on, at least in the core, plus some agricultural product sales, fencing and, watering troughs, things of that nature. There's also a horse facility up on the northeast corner. There's an equestrian facility up there and a couple of houses on that site. So this site has, of course, main access off 101 with a right in and right out only, because the highway's not actually contiguous at that point. It's split around the rocks. A second access is available or does exist via a dirt road over to Cole Road.
That's on the other side of a hill, though. What?
Yeah, you
how
go
much
up
of
and
a
over a
stacking
hill.
do they have on 101? They have a deceleration and acceleration lane on the right.
Yeah.
So I took a look at that and it looked like you could stack maybe 4 cars in there. Mm-hmm. And then you're right out in the middle of 101 on a blind turn. Mm-hmm. So part of the recommendation for that probably would be to move into the property significantly in order to take up that traffic, so there isn't a clog up of that.
Right, so there'd be room as you pull off the highway.
Yeah,
Have
so
a
you don't
long
have
enough driveway in that you don't.
Yeah.
You have some space there to absorb turning traffic. And there will be a setback because it's scenic. There's scenic corridor is, I think, 400 and some feet per general plan policy from Highway 101. There's a number in the general plan, or it may be in the zoning ordinance under scenic highways. There is an established number as far as how far is considered what the distance in from the center line of 101 is for consideration of scenic. But we're looking at, in this code, probably also including a specific building setback from the highway itself, just so there's not any chance of building a structure right up to the highway. And that probably plays importantly at this one as well as 129, maybe a little less so on some of the other sites. So the intent with 101, if it were included, would be to allow the existing uses would continue by right. Preserve the livestock and ranch theme. The tentative theme on this is called the ranch. And then potentially augment the 101 access with a formal access on Cole Road via San Juan Road overpass. Because right now you have to either, if you're coming from the south, you have to get off and turn around at 129, or you have to get off ahead San Juan Road and come in Cole Road. Those are the only two ways you can get there from the south. From the north, you can get there, but getting back to the north, of course, is an issue. You'd have to.
There's an overpass for 101 North that goes into Cole Road and coming
Right.
west on north and coming from the south.
Get her on record.
You can still Cole Road. I know Cole Road.
Yeah, from San Juan Road, you can get onto Cole.
So could you repeat could you repeat what she said so we can have that on record?
Okay, I think she was pointing out that you can reach Cole Road from San Juan Road. Of course, they connect there right before the overpass.
Mm-hmm.
And what I was saying is that in general, the access is somewhat of an issue if you're trying to return north or return south. It's not easy like the others where you have an immediate way to cross.
Excuse me, ma'am. You can't speak to him. We don't have a mic for you. Your time will come a little later, and I appreciate your input. It's awesome. I'm glad you're doing that. But we need to have your name and need to have you on record, okay? Thank you.
Well, it didn't say that in the flyer. It just said further comments.
Yeah, we're going to open that up later. Atta girl. Thanks
Okay.
thanks for the input.
In any case, there are some access issues at 101 that would need to be figured out, not necessarily with the zoning, although there could be some pieces written into the zoning for it, probably more so when development came to be at that site.
So I drove out there yesterday, just because I knew they closed Cole, but I hadn't been on there for a while to take that San Juan back over there. And it looks like it dips down a little at the intersection of Ricardo and Cole to where you might be able to end up doing some kind of a road access back there. But now you're taking a commercial element and you're dumping traffic from a commercial element onto like a residential neighborhood, especially in a larger acreage area. Do you advise that? I would think that the neighbors are going to hang us all.
Yeah, Cole definitely has a rural character to it.
Okay.
Yeah, Cole Road, especially when you get to the older part before it, where it got diverted over to San Juan Road, has a very rural character as a narrow road.
Right.
So it's certainly a consideration.
Well,
Okay.
that's the end that's close to the 101.
So, but at the end of this, you'll be advising or disadvising the use of that, right?
Yeah, we can look into that.
Okay.
As far as, mouse. Wow.
Bring us right into the 90s.
There you go. He's probably a Macintosh guy.
Yeah, probably. He thinks he can do everything from his phone. But the other point I wanted to make on the Livestock 101 is the intended theme for it entails a destination hospitality type of use. They've suggested, for example, a dude ranch type of a thing where you come for the weekend, rather, or at least more emphasized towards that than an on-off freeway type of a use where you've got the heavier traffic. So we may look into the traffic situation and determine if it's really not suitable for a higher volume type of commercial use. We may want to restrict that for that site.
So do they have can they do a restriction based on traffic flow in there and saying, okay, this area can really only support a certain number of cars? And once you hit that number of cars, how can you do anything about that?
We
How can you
could
restrict
probably address that in some indirect way, at least through the zoning.
Okay.
You could put, for example, a cap on the types of uses or a cap on the number of square feet of commercial that could be developed on that site.
Okay.
There's different ways that might not be specifically keyed to how many trips there are, but keyed to something that basically tells you how many trips there will be, based on standard trip rates.
In the 80s, there was a ton of traffic accidents out there on that turn.
Oh, yeah. That was a famous...
And if you've been around for a while, you remember that. Maybe they still happen, but it was... Then they put popcorn asphalt on there, and it helped a little. So safety is a big concern of mine in that particular area.
Right. Yeah, 101 way back was an issue all the way up through Santa Clara County. Okay, let's go on to the fourth one, which is Rock's Ranch. Here's the photos for livestock. Okay, so there's a trailer loading some cattle. There's a picture of the store where they sell, fencing and that type of thing, agricultural ranch products, and an aerial photograph looking across Highway 1 down at the Livestock 101 operation. Okay, so the next site is the Rock's Ranch node. You can see the red barn just there to the far left side of the photograph.
Oh, yeah.
Now, and the newer interchange there at San Juan Road. And if you follow that intersection down, you'll see a little spur that goes into the field at the lower part of the Rock's Ranch site. Originally, we mapped just about 60 or 70 acres down on that lower area. The landowner asked us to look at an expanded area with the idea that some sort of a lodging could be placed perhaps on the top of that wooded hill.
I'm kind of following, but could you use the mouse to help us out here?
Okay. I have a mouse now. All I need is a mouse pad. Here we go.
Oh, no.
Okay,
It's
Red
extra
Barn
for
is
the-
over in here. Here's the San Juan Road overpass. If you follow it towards the hill heading south, you'll see there's a little spur road here that was installed at the same time as the overpass, intended to provide access into this lower area. Originally, we looked at about 60, 70 acres in this lower area here, and the property owner asked us to consider adding in this larger area here. This is a hill that comes up above everything else, and there's a kind of a level area near the top that they thought might be appropriate for some sort of a destination type of use, like a hotel. Obviously, 280 acres, all 280 acres would not be built. The county has a woodlands removal ordinance that prevents removal of a significant amount of the oak woodland on the site. So right there is a check that would keep too much from getting developed. I think also we really don't envision 280 acres of commercial in that location. So we would probably write in some very specific limitations on how much building area would be on this site, given its size.
So could you see this building from the roadway? Is this going to be shielded and protected so nobody, if it is there, nobody knows it's there?
Our intention, because of the direction from the general plan, is to keep all of the development at all of the nodes as unobtrusive as possible, both through architecture and through siting.
Well, you have a tree line right along the freeway, because that's sort of where the watershed goes in down in there. And so you do have a natural buffer in there as long as they don't mess it up.
Right. This lower site's quite shielded from the freeway. In fact, the bigger issue with that site is would anyone know it was there?
Yeah.
That's really the bigger issue there, I think. And that brings in, what kind of signage regulation do we want?
We'll put that in Monterey County.
Yeah. We're actually talked about that. So a few photographs on rocks. I want to get back to the sign issue, because we've got a couple of particular sign ideas. The Rock Ranch node, here's some photographs. That's that lower area where the little spur road dead ends. That's that line of trees, and the highway's behind it. And then this is the start of that hill. This is the hill that got added into the site as viewed from the Red Barn. So you can see there's quite a bit of tree cover up near the crest of that hill. I don't think this is probably steeper than the county allows development on. Mm-hmm. And here's a view from this hill that's right here. This is a view from that hill looking down at the lower area towards the overpass. And the activity you see down here is PG&E staging for some pipe work. So the theme on this one is tentatively an early California village. Our idea is to nestle the development into the hills and the trees, create some visibility from Highway 101 to the extent that you know it exists, preserve the vegetation along Highway 101, because that shielding, I think, is quite critical to the scenic character, and then encourage a destination village and hospitality uses. So let me get back to the sign before I go to the rest of the... Our thinking is that the Rocks Ranch node at the south and the Bettabell node at the north would each have a sign that was general to the county in promoting the commercial uses that we're considering along 101 and tourism in general in San Benito County. Interesting at Rocks Ranch Road, because you're sitting right on the county line, and how to get a sign so that you know soon enough that you can get off the freeway at San Juan Road. So we actually did kick around the idea that perhaps San Benito County and Monterey County could coordinate, and maybe San Benito County would let Monterey County have a sign, and you'd get a sign. Mm-hmm. And you'd both come out ahead. But, of course, that would take some negotiation, and it would require finding sites. We're also envisioning that these signs that say, here you are in San Benito County, don't look like billboards, that they have some nice design element to them, so it's not just another, two big steel posts and a billboard. It's something that says, hey, you've come to a scenic San Benito County, and we've got some services ahead for you, and here's how to find them. So that was the thought on that signage, kind of a regional nodes overall signage that would promote the county's tourism, agriculture, and the commercial areas. So the tourism ties, actually, I could have spoken on that on this slide. So policy LU 5.6 in the general plan directs tourism tie, overall general commercial economic development piece to this. And so that's where we came up with the themes, the idea of having themes. Each one of these would have some theme that relates to San Benito County industry, San Benito County culture, something of that sort, and that each theme would then be tied to architecture, and the entire thing would be cohesive within each of the nodes. And each of the nodes would have some sort of a spot where there would be a little promotional kiosk or something of that sort, so that when you pulled off, you didn't just get gas and a hamburger and go on your way. You had an opportunity to understand what San Benito County had to offer, and that each of those nodes would be an opportunity to put that forth to visitors.
That concept was brought in front of this body some years back about having those guideline standards and stuff like that. I think it's good as long as it's not overdone.
Mm-hmm.
And as long as it's this, just say, worked in with the developer, so it's a teamwork kind of a situation with the county, rather than mandating that they become our marketing and advertising fund.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Right.
Chair,
Yes, go ahead.
in addition to what Commissioner Pierce has been stating, this county is very historic. It has huge assets within that are historic. And I think that each one of these nodes needs to point to that when you come into San Benito County, that you're coming into a historic area that is largely undiminished over time, like the Mission, our river, the Anza Trail, Fremont Peak. All of these different things, I think, need to be brought into play, and I think that there's going to be somebody that you can find within the historic societies that can point to better directions of thinking for design.
Excellent. Thanks for the suggestion. That sounds beneficial to get in touch with some of those people. We've got, of course, some tentative themes. A lot of those came from what landowners have suggested. And I think tying in the further historic piece is a good idea. And we toured at that Hill and Rocks Ranch. They pointed out where the old stage route came across. It's pretty interesting. And I'm sure there's treasure buried behind some of those rocks.
Sanchez treasure.
And little known is that the state gem of California is bonitoite,
That's right.
which is found here and only here.
Wow.
And you can buy it over the jack shop in San Francisco.
As long as it's not over the county line, we need to get a...
All right, so getting on to what the code piece for C3 would actually include. First, there would be an intent statement. Sometimes those are called purpose statements. Basically, it's going to take what's in the general plan and paraphrase it and probably add a few details to it. Basically, so that there's a question, a project comes before you, there's a question about, is this the right use or so on? You've got an intent code to look, or an intent section to look back on and say, well, here's the intent, and therefore from that I can infer this from other parts of the code. That's really the purpose of the intent statement. Give you the context and direction that was intended when the rest of it was written. So if something comes up that turns out to be ambiguous, you've got that to fall back on for a decision. And then the list of allowed uses and approval process. We envision 3 different approval processes. 2 are administrative, the site plan review for very simple applications, an administrative permit, and then a use permit. A couple of examples for site plan review, and this is out of your current code, are changes in use. So you've got an existing building and the use is changing, but it's similar. That's an administrative approval through a site plan review. Accessory type of uses are included on our tentative list. Things like parks or a fruit stand. Basically small and low investment types of uses would go through the site plan review. An administrative permit would include, at this point we're suggesting, retail, dining, lodging, and fuel. So your basic visitor services would be approvable with an administrative action. And then a conditional use permit for the next step up, things like vehicle repair, a medical or veterinary clinic. Some limited residential is proposed to be allowed, and then anything with alcoholic sales would be a conditional use permit.
I'm sorry, Richard, where were the hotels and the regional type things? Are those administrative or use permits?
Those are all currently under the administrative list. And then development standards, that's what's controlling your height, your site coverage, how far back your building is set from the property line or a road, how much parking you need, what the lighting looks like. Obviously, some of those are going to be very critical decisions when you're in scenic areas. There will be another section of the code that addresses those more specifically for each of the nodes. Signage, I already mentioned the regional tourism signs. Also, on-site signage is interesting in context with the scenic because you don't want, you probably don't want your standard 80-foot tall with a big round lit plastic bubble on it. So we're going to look closely at how the signage looks. Does it fit in an historic context and a scenic context?
Could you restrict that to monument signs only?
Yeah.
Not to exceed a certain height?
Yeah. We can write it however
is that too restrictive? Is that too restrictive for commercial, though?
It might be difficult given some of the sites and the visibility. But if we can deal with the issue of getting people on the off-ramp soon enough to get to the sites, then we're good. So, and it may be that just utilizing the Caltrans, services signs for the next exit, and they allow advertising for specific uses as well. That might be a good way to get the signage without being out of context with what you normally see on a highway. And then special regulations, we're going to deal with the theme, the architecture, how the site is laid out. We don't want, even though we're restricting these to nodes, we still don't want strip commercial within the nodes. So we don't want strip commercial on a mini scale as well as on a macro scale. And then how to address scenic resources. And we've got these as special regulations because we think probably these are unique enough to each of the nodes that we want to treat them individually. Now, if we write this up and it turns out, hey, that's pretty universal, we'll move that up to development standards as well and it'll apply everywhere. But we're picturing this last set of sections to focus on each of the nodes. And as Tavin said earlier, you could at some point redesignate some place for this zone. We will be writing in something that requires that a new district that's not contiguous to an existing district would have to go through the same piece. They'd have to add a section that governed their new site. So that would be part of the process of a rezone to this district. So what we'd really like to get from the Commission is comment on the boundaries for each of these nodes, comments on what you find to be appropriate or inappropriate uses under each of the approval levels, and comment on whether you think the approval levels themselves are appropriate. And, of course, there's some discussion on Livestock 101 if people want to, throw out pros and cons or thoughts on how that site would be developed or if it would be included. The timing on this, draft code sections are partially written at this point, of course, pending some additional input at this point. Hope to have those done next month. Final code sections, we're aiming for December with tentative hearings January to March. However, That could get put back away as with a general plan amendment for livestock 101. At this point, up till now, we've been operating with the idea that perhaps that was intended to be included within the nodes, and if it's appearing that it wasn't, then we need to look further at a general plan amendment. So that would push the timing out.
So, and that's what I was worried about. So, can we pull that and go forward and be done faster with the three we have, and then could they then mesh in and merge later? That way, we would be hurting the ones that are ready to go, and it wouldn't hurt them because they would be able to just merge.
Yeah,
is that a possibility?
Certainly a possibility.
Okay.
Do that in 2 stages.
Yeah, I mean, we've been doing this is 8 years.
Right. There's
We've
no
been
question
waiting
on
to
the
get this
3.
done.
Yeah.
Okay. We don't need to wait any longer.
Yeah, we were informed when we got the contract that this should get done. So if we can speed up 3/4 of it and let the 4th piece trail behind, if it is deemed appropriate to add it, then we could certainly go that route.
Sure.
Through the
As long as it doesn't hurt everyone,
Right.
either side. So,
Yeah, I think the way we've got it set up, it's compartmentalized enough that you can add pieces, just as Tavin said, you could beyond the 4. We could do 3 and add a 4th if that was the direction that we were given.
Through the chair, may I ask the consultant a question?
Yeah, you can ask him.
Richard, would you clarify? I see you say draft code section November, final code sections December, tentative hearings January to March. Which of those and how when's the next time that we really inform the Planning Commission of our progress point?
I would say sometime in the late December, early January timeframe, assuming that we get these written and staff reviews them, and then we get our revisions back and have what we would consider a public final draft.
But so I'm wondering, is there a time in between at least once before we're asking for an action from them?
There's nothing built into this schedule, but we could certainly add that in. It would add some time to the overall time frame.
Because we have moved the Planning Commission calendar around a little bit. We took November and December meetings and put them on December 5. So when you say draft code sections November, it sounds like that's more of a internal staff and consultant exercise, and maybe with the direction we're getting here, we're really kind of shaping the clay, but not necessarily presenting them with a product at that time. But at one point, we're maturing the thing. Okay.
Yeah, we could look into the schedule and see if we could get a product ready for their review in December. If not, January for sure. And in advance.
I just wanted the commission and for my own self to know, if there's
an update.
One more midpoint check before you're being asked for an action recommendation to the board.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah, and we've got a 3-month window in there at this point for the approval process. So if January ended up being let's look at it and comment, that still gives us the rest of January to make some changes and still could get back to the Planning Commission February and the board in March.
Without cutting your presentation, do you have many more slides?
That's the last slide.
Oh, then I have a question I'd like to ask as well, if I could, through the
Continue.
chair.
Continue talking.
Continue going. Well, we know so often with development proposals, there's this CEQA aspect where if someone's going to do environmental review on zone changes, would you just share the background and the reliance on the general plan work and the EIR that's been done, and how that's not going to be this new, unexpected, long thing?
Right. The general plan, EIR, of course, studied the general plan, which included the policy directing these commercial nodes. And so our intention with this zoning ordinance was to do an addendum to the EIR. That's a non-circulated piece that basically says, is there anything here that is a surprise and different than what we expected when we wrote the EIR? And we don't anticipate that there would be anything because particularly the three nodes that are on the map are anticipated. We'd be looking at specifics of the sites now that we have boundaries. And we'd be saying, is there anything within those boundaries that's really not covered in the EIR that was prepared for the general plan? And I think because the way we want to write this is to write in some safety pieces for riparian and flood zone and that type of constraint that it occurs on these sites and woodland preservation, I think we wouldn't have any significant impacts that weren't already identified in the general planning IR. So we can then do an addendum. That would be a piece that you would, you don't really certify. I think you accept an addendum.
Accepted. And one more, with the highway, with the livestock 101 not being a part of the general plan, we've clarified that, which means the environmental document didn't address that. Would there be special or extra work that would be required in some way to address commercial 101?
Yeah, we would look at.
Livestock
Do you want to speak to that,
101?
Michael? Sure. Okay.
I know they've.
There's a couple
I know
routes
they've
under-
contributed to the effort, and they've asked. They want to. I'll let you speak.
Yeah, there's a couple routes you could take under CEQA. I'll let Michael address it.
Michael Groves, President of EMC Planning Group. Thank you. Tavin, it's a good question, and Daryl and I were just talking about it as the Planning Commission was speaking, and we do feel that if the further research that you do as a county or we do with you determines that this was not part of the general plan, which is what has been presented tonight, then we think that some other type of environmental review will need to be done. Maybe it'll be a formal initial study or a extended initial study that turns into a mitigated negative declaration of some sort. Could be further work on from the environmental document. But in either case, it's going to be tiered off the general plan environmental document.
Mr. Chair.
All right, go ahead.
Michael, I think for the people in the audience, if you could explain the steps that they would have to give input through this process.
Sure. So, Commissioner Lowe, that's a really good spot. We talked about, Tavin was raising that, just kind of raising the issue about coming back. I think for the people in the audience, you would come back to the next Planning Commission meeting in which we'd probably have another workshop. It's not in our budget or our scope to do that, but I think we can figure out a way to make that happen so that we get back to you in January. And I don't think it's probably going to be December because you have two meetings converging at the same time. November, December, you'll probably have a full agenda. If we get there in December, great, but the expectation would probably be January. So I think that's the opportunity for the public to come back and see what has been presented. How did we take it from tonight's meeting to the next step in terms of creating a code section, actually having a chance to see it as a public document and review the code section? Does it have the protections in it that they're looking for? And then we would go from there to a public hearing process, which would then come back to the Planning Commission again for an action item, if you will. And then you're going to take however long you want to do that to go through that. Could be a one meeting, could be two meetings, whatever. And that's a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors. And then they'll have another opportunity to present their concerns at the Board of Supervisors when they take up the zoning change.
I just want to make sure the public understands that this is just not one meeting and it's a slam dunk and over. So.
To piggyback on Pat's and to the speaker, is there an access to you outside of these meetings? Do you have a website? Do you have an email? So the public, this is San Benito County. All these people are going to go out there and they're going to tell their friends and they're going to go, oh, darn, I missed it. And so can they go and access you later with their ideas, their concerns, their thoughts?
If I could.
The point guard on the basketball team is right there. Daryl Boyd and Tavin.
Your name was named, dude. You're in trouble now.
So Daryl's the point guard, and all correspondence goes through Daryl. And we've been really clear about having that happen that way so we could have this type of correspondence. So if something wants to come in, send it to Daryl. And if you need to get his contact information, he can provide that at the end of the hearing. And that way you have it coming to him. He'll get it to us. And so we'll all have it as part of the team.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
And there was one other point that Daryl mentioned just as I was stepping away, and that's the general plan amendment might be a little bit different. If we do a general plan amendment for Livestock 101, there's going to be a little bit of a different process potentially. So either if we run it parallel process side by side, or we separate it as you had requested earlier, However we do that, there will be a little bit of a different process, may have other hearing opportunities for that.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification.
And if I may add, during the CEQA review, depending on the type of CEQA review, there would be potentially other public comment opportunities. With an addendum, it's not circulated for public review, and there is no public comment on it, but of course, people can speak to that at the hearings. If we did a negative declaration or a supplemental EIR, for example, on the general plan amendment for Livestock 101, there would be a formal public comment period, and then there would be the certification hearings on those documents. So there would be those opportunities for people to comment during the environmental process.
Probably one other point to make, I'm sorry, but probably one other point to make is because we prepared the general plan and the general plan EIR, it was very thorough, and the findings that you made as a planning commission and the findings that went to the board were very thorough. And so it's a really substantial document that did not get challenged. So, and the other point about that, and this is a little kind of over the head maybe in terms of what we need to talk about tonight, but we made overriding findings on a lot of subject areas where there were significant unavoidable impacts. So because the Planning Commission and the board made overriding findings on air quality and a lot of other things, a lot of those subject matters are really been put to bed. It's probably the best way to say in terms of those impacts. What we want to really get down to, are there anything that's significant with regard to these specific sites and the zoning on these specific sites?
Thank you.
So as this returns to the chair, as I'm understanding, maybe we put a little to-do list. We've got the boundaries discussion, where we're looking for guidance. But before the boundaries is, do we have 4 nodes or 3? And I think that's been really discussed. So, and then when we get the boundaries, whether you feel those shapes are appropriate, because at the end of the day, the round circle may move to a property shape on one side or 2 sides of the highway. So we'll need your input on that. And then I believe I heard the uses and the levels of uses that we'd have at C3, whether a hotel is reviewed at the staff level or a regional draw is going to be a planning commission level thing. So maybe you have a few slides to supplement the commission's discussion of those affairs. And I think you might have wanted a little bit more information after they work through those. Is that correct?
Yeah, we get some input. I think we could use the January meeting to come back if we, for example, if we're looking at a boundary change to one of the sites or 2 of the sites, we come back and bring those back for your review before we finalize things. And likewise, we would bring, in January, would bring the entire written ordinance for your review. And you can see exactly what the uses are that we're proposing for each of the approval levels.
And just for clarification, when we said this gentleman is the point man, when you pointed to Mr. Darrell Boyd, raise your hand again. He's operating as a county staff member, so he's not necessarily a consultant on behalf of the applicants. He represents county staff as equal to like my position.
Okay, that's all I've got. I will return that to the commission if you have questions.
Can we take a 5-minute break and then go to public comment?
Okay, let's take a 5-minute break. Okay.
All right. Thank you. I wasn't expecting a curveball right at the beginning, but you smoothed that out nicely. They're going, I'm not going to redo my slideshow right now and separate Livestock 101 out of everything. I think that's fine. I mean, people understand now that it's in a different situation.
We think so.
And, yeah, we don't know for sure yet, I guess.
Well, I can't find anything that says...
Yeah.
Commissioners, any questions?
Not at this time.
No.
Thank you. Not at this
Ready
time.
for public comment?
Okay, then we'll open public comment. You have 3 minutes to talk.
Andy? Corin?
Good evening, commissioners and staff and the public. My name is Andy Shaw-Coron. I live off of Cole Road on Ricardo Drive, right next to, or adjacent to one of the nodes, actually next to two of your nodes, both the Rocks Road node and the node that you designate as the Livestock 101 auction node. I have concerns about both of these places as any areas of expanding commercial development. First, let's talk about the Rocks Road node where you've done where the state did the over-ramp across 101 at San Juan Road. That hill that it was mentioned as a hill, it's really more of a mountain that you're talking about there. We refer to it often as Penacate Peak, with these magnificent rock outcroppings that anybody can see as they drive through there. Almost everybody knows that mountain, anybody who drives down this state. Anne Marie Sayers tells me that it was a sacred site for the Ohlone Indians. I'm sure that there wasn't an adequate assessment of archaeological importance of that area, and if that was a sacred site, I imagine that the place where people lived was down by the creek, Carneros Creek, which is below, that runs right along the highway there, which is the headwaters of Elkhorn Slough. So anything that happens down there, of course, affects Elkhorn Slough, one of the most important biological areas in the entire state. So it's an area that I think is very both archaeologically and biologically sensitive. And I'm sure I can't be arrested at this point. It's been about 25 years since my trespassing days on that property, but any time that it rains, that whole area, that flat area in the bottom becomes a marsh. All the hill drains down to that area that's adjacent to the creek, and it's really part of the wetlands. Probably originally had a lot more trees on it, were probably cleared by ranch folks over the years. Now, the 101 livestock auction, I've lived off of Cole Road on Ricardo for almost 30 years now, actually over 30 years, and it is a beautiful rural area. People love living out there. It's a quiet road. It's gotten busier now because of the traffic jams on 101. People come down that road, unfortunately, at high speeds and dangerously. But we don't need more of that. We all came to that area to live in a really beautiful place, and any expansion of that project should be very much limited and not come off the Cole Road area. Is my time up?
No.
Thank you.
Can we ask them anything?
Yes, you can.
Excuse me. Would you go back?
Sure. So question.
You have to ask the chair.
Oh,
Yeah, go ahead.
thank you. I always get tongue-tied and I never know what to say to you. Sorry. I'm concerned about the Elkhorn Slough and what you have said about that area, because I do know that does get inundated with water. Now, if that is part of the source for the Elkhorn Slough, recently the Elkhorn Slough has been designated an area of interest, world class, and that do you know if there is any source from the Elkhorn Slough who could validate or recommend anything for that area?
I have friends on the Elkhorn Slough Foundation. I could ask for somebody to talk to us about that, but that Carneros Creek goes right underneath the highway and continues all the way down to Las Lomas and into the slough. So
perhaps you could gather that information
Sure.
a bit and send it on to Mr. Boyd.
Okay, I'd be happy to do that.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
More questions? No? Thank you.
Mary Corin?
Hello, my name is Mary Shaw Coron, and I have a lot of concerns about the process. I do remember in 2015 attending a meeting actually here to discuss a proposal to allow in the general plan development in the Rocks Road, I guess it's called the Rocks Ranch area. It's actually pretty extensive there. And one of the things I raised at the time, I believe it was the supervisors who were voting on it, and it passed. Mr. Batella was the only one who opposed allowing development there. I remember mentioning at the meeting that there really is a water problem in this area, in the area that we all live. Ballantree, which is right near Rocks Road, right behind the Red Barn, which is on the Monterey side, I have friends who live there and bought land, and their well went dry. And so to resolve that problem, their property became almost worthless. So they took advantage of the pipe that was brought in for Rancho Larios. I don't know if you know the history there. That development did not have water because San Juan Bautista refused to give them any, and some other stuff happened. So they got it from Aromas Water District. So Aromas Water District, created this pipeline down our road. I live near Cole Road, and it also supplied water to the Ballantree area. There's also other developments nearby on the Monterey side, Oak Ridge, which ran out of water. Their wells went dry. It became pretty much worthless, so the people there begged the Aromas Water District to bring water in. Now, Aromas Water District, what I have heard is that they are, the aquifers are in overdraft. A friend of mine who lives in Aromas and works for the Santa Cruz Water Department told me this. And I have a well. I live right across from Rocks Road on the other side of the highway. And I know that some of our neighbors have had issues with wells. They've had to redig their well. So water is a real problem. And I think that for any development to happen there, you're going to have to ask, where's the water going to come from? And I asked this question. I remember one of the lawyers representing the developer who wanted to develop Rocks Road at the time, 2015, said, we're going to get it from Monterey. Well, that's a real laugh because Monterey had to get it. The Oak Ridge is in Monterey, had to get it from Aromas. So I think the pressure is going to be on Aromas to provide water again, which is going to cause all of us here who live in Aromas to really have a situation where more and more water is going to be used for these major developments. You're talking about hotels. This is really pretty wasteful in terms of the use, or extensive in use of water. So that's actually one of my primary concerns. So I would venture to guess that any EIR, that is the general plans, probably has not taken into account these types of issues. So I would really like this to be considered. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kim Lavanino.
Hello. My family, I represent my family. We own the 185 acres. It's where 129 and 101 intersect there on the north west side. I saw a picture of it on one of the slides that went by. And we always knew that this was commercial property at some point in time, and we just want to participate. So I've already talked to Daryl about including us in that. I'm in the baby stages of this, so I'm looking to you for direction on what to do next. And I have a copy of the plot map. I don't know if you want that or if it's something that's of interest. I gave one to him. But if anybody else wanted it, I had it. But that's really all I have to say, is just that we want to participate.
Through the chair, may I ask that the planner put the slide up on the screen and identify her property in the context of the node?
It's the south end of Bettable of the parcel that we see. It's the last one at the end, isn't it, Kim?
Yeah. It butts up to Bettable.
How much is in floodplain, do you think?
Is in floodplain?
Yeah, back end of it?
Uh-huh. And I wouldn't even be able to tell you exactly
that's too broad.
where.
We need to
Mark
go
can tell
in.
you that because he farmed it, but
Mm-hmm. You still growing tomatoes out there?
no. But
Okay.
we retired, and so they lease it out to. They grow lots of stuff. But not tomatoes.
Could you point yours out?
Is it Bettaville or?
No, that's 129. We need Bettable. Next one up to
We're
the
right
north. There we go.
Where you had all the little flea market and the taco truck.
It's 129.
Yeah, that's us.
No, Bettable.
No, it's 129.
Is it
129,
129?
but we abut the Bedabel because it's a
Oh.
long piece of property. It comes up.
Wow.
We're adjacent to that. It's 185 acres.
Which are the properties on the screen that are yours?
Figure that out.
You can even just reach up and touch them above you, and we'll find them with the mouse.
Those pictures, I think, were more helpful.
I think it's south.
Are you near the high school?
We're on the northwest.
You need the
Corner.
slide that shows 129.
West.
Oh, that is.
That is
That
129.
is 129.
That's a little.
Chittenden Road, that's
And here's 101 right here.
one.
So so here's 101 and 129.
Yeah, it's right there. It's right there. Yeah, I know what you're doing.
Is it this area?
Those two yellow lines.
Might be on the other map, actually.
I know.
Yeah.
On the west side, the northwest corner.
Here. Here.
That's better. Well,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does that make sense to you now?
Okay, there we go. So it's,
do you see it?
No,
Yeah,
it
these
just
parts-
abuts Bedabel. Our property goes all the way up
Yeah.
to the Bedabel. That's why we were contacted, because we're adjacent.
so it's along the Pajaro River here, and then along Highway 129, more or less. And then it looks like it touches Highway 129. And then as it continues this way to 101. So it's this piece in here that's in
Right.
between the Bedabel site and the 129 site. I think it is. Let's see. Back this way. Is this part of your property here?
Yeah, this is
I'm not
This
able
is
to
where the
lay
truck
those two
park and
together.
sold
right.
Hats and such.
Yep.
Where's
Okay,
the
so
mouse?
a portion of that site's already within the 129.
Okay.
Okay.
So we don't know how that should be divvied up, but we just know now's the time. We're going to piggyback onto what's being done.
Okay. Thank you.
Seth Capron?
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Seth Capron. I'm a 38-year resident of Cole Road. I've got a bunch of laundry lists of things, so I'll try to go through them quickly. This has been a long time in coming. It does make sense to try to take advantage of the commercial flow through the county, but it's a huge change for western San Benito County. We really want to make sure we do it right. So one of the issues is what kind of environmental review is necessary. It's my understanding that the EIR for the general plan is a program EIR, and that when you implement the zoning, you really need to do a project EIR. I think some of the potential environmental effects have been brought up tonight that really need to be looked at more closely. So doing an EIR on this project seems like it's much more appropriate. Also think that all of these larger developments we're talking about, it would be totally appropriate to require a use permit and not have administrative over-the-counter permits for any of them. I think if you look at similar situations the county requires use permits for, these would be larger projects than many of the things that you currently require a use permit for. In the EIR for the general plan, it talks about traffic levels, and it talks about moving from a traffic level C to a traffic level D. Caltrans is saying, they'd like to keep the highway at more in between a C and a D. Moving to a D level is more of an urban traffic congestion. I think we don't want to be looking like Santa Clara County in the future. And even now, those are abstract analytical descriptions. A lot of you who live in Hollister probably go up 25 and don't go drive that corridor of 101, but it's basically impassable going southbound on Saturdays and northbounds on Sundays for a good bit of the day, both days. So the idea of adding more traffic to that needs a very close look. And I didn't see that kind of detailed analysis in the EIR that was done for the general plan itself. I also have some particular concerns about the 101 auction yard site in terms of any access onto Cole Road. I think that the zoning for the properties that front Cole Road that are part of that larger parcel should remain rural residential to maintain the character of our road in the neighborhood. It would just be a huge change to have a major commercial dumping out on that road. And I think on all of these sites, you really need to look specifically, not just at parcels, but at parts of parcels. I think on the consultants, we're raising that issue, the mountain area and a scenic highway area, including the hilltop as part of that commercial zone. I wonder if another speaker could yield their time to me.
No.
Okay, I guess I'm done then. Thank you very much.
Robert Rowe?
Go for it, do it.
Hi, I'm Robert Rowe. I live off of Cole Road on Ricardo Road. First of all, I wanted to thank these guys for their presentation. I thought it was a really good presentation. I like the themes of it, but I don't like all the development right across the street from my house. I'm really concerned about the water issues because we do have water issues out there, and I'm very concerned about traffic. I like the idea of a dude ranch. I don't know if that was Warren's idea or your guys' idea, but I kind of like that idea. That seems like a lot less traffic than, hotels and a lot less water use than hotels. So I think we're on the right step in reviewing this process, and I hope that my representative, Valerie, will really look closely at how we develop these areas and keep it scenic. Really, the view of Jim Warren's 101 trailer is my view every day, and I've had visitors from all over the world. I have family in Germany. It's just amazing, and I'm really blessed to live out there, and I hope that any changes that do happen are very subtle and very, how do I want to say, just appreciate what we have there. Let me see. Yeah, no, that's it. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Steve Zuppra?
Hello, my name is Steve Zora. I live off of Cole on Ricardo as well. I'm more than likely going to yield most of my time to my long-standing neighbors, but I'm new to the area, just over 1 year. Moved here because of the beauty. I'm really concerned about Rocks Road and the 101 impacting the neighbors on Cole. We already have a lot of congestion with the new San Juan, and I hope that people keep that into consideration. This is why a lot of people move here, is to keep this place beautiful. And I'm concerned. And the only other thing I will add is ensuring that with all of this, that we have the appropriate resources, both safety, fire, and law enforcement, to consider the new developments in the area. Thank you.
Todd Azevedo?
Thank you, Board, for hearing my comments, and the general public as well. My name is Todd Azevedo. I've lived in Aromas Hills Equine Estates for 15 years. It is on Ricardo Drive, and we are directly looking down on the new flyover for San Juan Road. It has made it quite a bit safer for everyone on the weekends and all times. It has brought a large amount of noise pollution. So my comment would be to address pollution, not only noise pollution that has already come off of that road, just from the trucks going down to Watsonville and what have you, trucks accelerating, trucks stopping, all the lights coming off of the overpass, looking right up at our place now. So I know that a commercial development on Rocks Road would increase light pollution, noise pollution in that area, not to mention, to reiterate Mary's point on the water. So we are also, looking at three different problems here, in my opinion. One being noise pollution, in addition to what we already have. Light pollution. It's a beautiful area. We get to see our skies at night, and I'm afraid if we have a lot of new lights over there, that's going to inhibit that. And we'd love to look at the 101 auction yard land, big fields, big open meadows. That is why I moved there. I don't want to lose that. I do like the overpass for safety. I don't like the commercial aspect going over on that Rocks Road property. For the sole fact we're looking right up at that mountain. Anything, even if it was built up on top of that mountain, we would see an array of lights. And it's just, I don't think that it fits with the rural atmosphere of that area. So that's all I have to say. Thank you for hearing.
Darlene? Hello, my name is Darlene Azevedo. Thank you for hearing me and having us here this evening. I, too, live on Ricardo Drive in the Equine Estates. Please know that there are many neighbors who have horses and other farm animals that are quite concerned about the traffic in the area, also the pollution, as Todd mentioned, and also the water issues. I could reiterate all those things again, but I think my neighbors have very well explained all of our concerns. One of my biggest concerns is the traffic. Cole Road, once the double lines it turns into a small country road. And our road, which is a private road that dead ends into our project, which you probably well know, is also a small country road. There are many people walking their dogs. There are many horses on the street. The safety for our community is a big discussion. And we want to stay safe, we want to stay quiet, and we want to stay small. Though understanding that commercial will come in, I just really hope it's appropriate. A dude ranch sounds really fun. It's what I do every day almost. But, we want it to be appropriate for the neighborhood if it happens, and all of the safety measures taken in order to make sure that the support system is there. Thank you.
Pat Lerman?
Hi, I'm Pat Lerman. Thank you. I live in Aromas. I don't live anywhere near any of these projects, so my neighbors may not be as happy with my view of things because I'm not really on it. But first of all, I want to thank San Benito County and the Planning Commission for thinking about bringing in revenue, because we really desperately need revenue in this county. And if it's done appropriately in the right places with the right protections, that could help us a lot. I mean, we're a very poor county in terms of public services. But there are some major, and people have talked about some of these, there's some major concerns, and it's been said already, but water is so critical. There is no water, and I was asking, I'm sorry, I forgot your name. Richard, where does that belong in this process, the determination of water? Is it when you're getting the use permits, or do we put it in the zoning thing? But there is no water. So I hope that somehow you're able to figure out a way that the water is one of the benchmarks of making decisions about this. The other thing is Caltrans. Now, it seems to me that Caltrans is going to have an awful lot to say about some of this. For instance, getting on and off to the auction. I mean, that terrifies me when I'm on the road just driving south on it, that people are coming in and out. And I would think, I was hoping that Caltrans had a long-range plan to really make it a freeway where people couldn't just zip in and out of, that place. To me, the 101 auction just seems totally an inappropriate location because of the ingress and egress question, and because it's so close to Cole Road. That really concerns me. The other thing is any of this in the coastal zone? And where does that belong in this planning thing? Because when you were talking, I think Andy was talking about the flow of some of this in the Carneros Creek. I mean, that's coastal zone. So I hope that you've looked at that, and that would be really important to know if the coastal zone is impacted. The traffic, of course, I mean, like, I don't know who said it, but I never drive any place on 101 on a weekend in the summer, because if you go north or you go south, you can go to Prunedale and you never will come back again. And the other thing is I'm so concerned about the history and the culture to find out if there is Native American land there. We should really know before we go forward. Native American monuments. And the thing that really concerns me is the eucalyptus, the Vertigo, the movie Vertigo, and that eucalyptus stuff. Is any of this in where that eucalyptus is? And somebody mentioned when we were talking, that should become a historical zone, because that really is historical in the movie Vertigo, that they're going down. Of course, they're going in the wrong direction, but that they're going down that. So I would just hope that doesn't get impacted. Thank you. I set my own timer, but it won't stop.
Helen Kastner?
I'm not going to repeat what I've already said. Thank you, Commissioners. I also live on Cole Road. 101 goes up here. My property abuts on the other side of the hill. All of us in here are on the same aquifer, I'm betting. No water. Anything that goes in on 101 not only has to have water in any of these nodes, it has to have sewage. We're all in septic tanks. I'm concerned about the impact on the secondary roads, especially to the north. Cole Road feeds into Anzar Road and then into Carr Road, which is how you go to downtown Aromas. I use Anzar to go to San Juan Bautista because I won't drive 101. I use Anzar Road to go to 129, and from there get on 101 after the eucalyptus trees stop falling on 101. Cole Road has, if there's any rain, please, it has puddles, significant ones. It's a terrible road, and there's no way we can handle any more traffic there. We're not talking little houses, all of us. We've got acreage, and that's why we moved there. So I think there's a lot of things to consider besides just having a node. There's other places in San Juan Bautista that we can, enhance. Nobody's going to stop on 101. They're moving. They don't care. And that's kind of cynical. But if you listen to the traffic reports in the morning or the afternoons, I commuted to San Jose from Cole Road. I did that for several years. I got up at 4 in the morning to miss the traffic. My neighbor works at the CHP way station. He gets up at 3:30 to get to work on time. So thank you for your time.
Jane Rickdown?
Hi, I'm Jane Recadal. I live on Cole Road. I wanted to mention that the general plan EIR states that regional commercial will be at Bedabel and San Juan Road interchanges will not contribute to vehicular traffic on 101, but I think that probably isn't true. I think that if you build it, they will come. And so I think traffic will, in fact, be impacted quite significantly. Also, putting a hotel on the top of a hill at the 129 interchange would not be appropriate for this area. It would need to be located in a much lower area with a low profile, so it's not so obviously sticking out and keeping in better character with the land. I agree about the noise pollution and the light pollution that's going to be quite enhanced, not just from traffic, but from buildings that keep their lights on all night. I would reiterate that all the Cole Road frontage properties should be kept 5-acre minimum zoning so that it's not impacting the rural nature of Cole Road, so that no commercial development should be allowed along Cole Road proper, but rather parcels of land should be kept as 5-acre zoning there. The traffic on Cole Road is likely to be greatly enhanced if access to 101 comes onto Cole Road. I don't know how on earth that's going to work. So that if there's an access road from 101 property, the livestock yard, onto Cole Road, I think it's going to be a very serious disaster. Additionally, with increased traffic in the area, we all know that Google Maps and Waze and other apps that help drivers avoid congestion on 101 already shift traffic onto our small roads like Anzar Road and Cole Road, and they are not built for these. We saw the 101, on Anzar Road a couple of years ago, a semi-truck go off the side of Anzar and fall over on its side and was there and closed the roads down for at least a day. So I think any increase of traffic, any increase of commercial is going to bring more people, and it's going to make the other roads be greatly impacted as well. Thank you.
Jim Warren?
I'm Jim Warren from one of the owners of 101 Livestock, and I thank you for the time. I appreciate it. There's some inconsistencies that have been spoke about here tonight, and I want to hit the first one is the 101 Livestock was discussed as a commercial node from the beginning. All the commercial meetings, all the meetings that were held, all the discussion, we were always considered a commercial node. Because we were already commercial property, I think that's probably the reason that we never got stuck in on a node, because our property's been commercial for 45 years. So that's something that needed to be addressed. And the general plan was started by a different company, and I think they left our node out of that deal, and then these folks actually took over. And I think they would be willing to tell you that they left it out by a mistake. But that either here nor there, we've always been part of this discussion, and we've been part of the discussion right up to the funding of this project. So we always thought we were a part of that node. Nobody ever considered that we weren't part of a node. They just considered the fact that the node wasn't dotted on the map. And everybody should know that. When you talk about Cole Road being unsafe, first of all, let's go back. In 1975, when we first came here, that place was a junkyard. It had an old junkie flea market. It really didn't look very good. And for 43 years, everything we've done there has improved the property and increased the value. And we went from one full-time employee in 1975 to we have 20 full-time employees. And we didn't do that. We didn't do that by tearing the country up, making the country look bad. All the issues that people talk about today are things that we think about every day ourselves because we live there. And we've got water. We have water. When you talk about water, we've got our own water. We don't need water. We gave Aromas Water free access through our property to service water to houses that didn't have water and to the Rancho Larios project. We never got one penny for it. So we've been there, and we've been in this community for a long time. When you talk about Cole Road and the access to Cole Road was a hazard for years until about 2 years ago. We finally got tired of it. We went in and took out an old gate, cut the ground back to where it was more general sloping, and set the road back so that a truck can get off the highway. You can drive a pickup up, get off the highway, open the gate, and drive in our property. Before, you drove out of that gate, you drove right onto Cole Road. And that was dangerous. And then if you want to talk about access to Highway 101, we've got 3 accesses to Highway 101. And I'll guarantee you what, when they closed the road to go straight across from the northbound traffic to the southbound traffic into our place, they built the access roads that we've got to get in and out of our property. And those were built to state specs. so we can get in and get out of our property. A lot more cars than coming in and out of our property today because we have those deceleration and acceleration lanes. And anybody's got questions, just call me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Warren? Yeah. Get back up. So this is the point where you need to work with Daryl, who has all the minutes and the background and everything on this, and see if you can rediscover what was going on. Because a bigger issue on your particular property is making sure it was in the original views and EIRs and all of that. That's the issue of us breaking the law or not breaking the law.
It was in all the discussions, I can promise you that.
Well,
And
just take that to Daryl,
Yeah.
bring it up, research it, and bring it forward and see what you guys can come of it. Okay?
Sounds good. Questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Bill Hunter?
Bill Hunter, I live on School Road, so I look down on the 129 interchange, and it seems, I don't know, 15, 18 years ago when Ruth Kessler was the supervisor and Anthony Freitas was the planning commissioner, we addressed this, and they wanted to do commercial property and subdivision and everything, and it was unanimous, everybody on School Road. I wish I still had the visual, but everybody that I talked to and signed a petition, I just put a little pin in, and it was amazing how many people were actually on School Road that were against that. Water, man, I'm just thinking if all of a sudden, I mean, there's greater demands on the aquifer, and my well goes dry, or Valerie's, we're neighbors, goes dry, what's our recourse? I mean, if naturally they're down lower, so they'd be sticking their straw in lower than we are, and we'll go dry. I'm upset with myself, and I'm upset with the county that this is the first I knew about this. That's partially mine, but I got the notification, and I guess it's been going on for 8 years. So I also have a question as to, are there other nodes throughout the county, or are we the only ones shouldering this? I guess there's financial benefits for the county. Is this just being shouldered by West San Benito County? I can think of other places in other parts of the county that, if we have to share, the burden should be shared.
Mr. Hunter?
Yes.
Can you stop this clock right there? So there are other commercial nodes. They're just not CRs. They're not regional commercial. And there are a number of them throughout. And if you go to commercial and industrial nodes figure 3.5, they've got them outlined so you can find them there. Okay?
Okay.
The CR is just the ones on 101.
Okay.
Okay. Those are larger and all of that.
All right. Then I wonder about, talking to Valerie, she said that part of the plan is to get people to slow down so they'll enjoy our county. And I'm afraid that I can't agree. Slowing down to buy gas. If you want to slow them down, let's put a park in. Let's put something that would be worth slowing down for, not just a gas station and a hotel. And we don't need more light pollution. And I wonder about, is this really going to benefit us, or is it going to benefit the people that get to, that own the property? And are you going to get more property taxes, or is their property going to be reassessed? Or will Proposition 13 keep their property values down low until they sell? Let's look at the actual advantage. I've got a quarry right next to me, and when they redid the permit for the quarry, it was like, there's all kinds of advantages to the county, but what the county actually gets as far as employees compared to what it does to the road, I can't agree with it. So thank you for your
sales tax. Sales tax. That's how it benefits.
No more speakers.
No more speakers. Any questions from the commissioners? There's no more speakers. So, close public comment. Okay, we'll close public comment. Okay, let's have discussion here. Mr. Pierce?
Okay.
And-
You want to-
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I think we've heard loud and clear tonight that the people that own the property in the area are concerned mostly about water, namely about water. And the other thing that I really heard was what are actually going to be going into these nodes. And I think that's a great question because I don't have that answer. At one time, we kind of talked about it up here, but it was never settled. I think moving forward, we need definitely that answer, what we're talking about in these nodes. And I believe, especially in starting out, that nothing should be handled administratively. Everything needs to come to the Planning Commission. The neighbors need to know what's going in there. The neighbors have the right to come before the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors and speak their concerns. I don't have a problem with adding the 129-101, the extra land there. I think that's fine. I think that's what we should be doing. We should really be looking at the whole plan right now instead of piecemealing it afterwards. I also would feel more confident knowing exactly what we're talking about CEQA-wise. Are we going to be talking about EIRs? Are we, that's too nebulous for me to even make a decision on right now. So I'd like more information on that. And I think those are just my brief comments right now.
Since I also look down on the 101 and have had family there for a long time, I'm quite well acquainted with the Aromas concerns, the people who have spoken, and I think we have a lot to digest, and I think they'll continue to bring forward valid concerns, and vamos a ver. We shall see.
So the comments I have were there was a lot of concern about water. And before a project can go through or actually get a conditional use permit, they have to prove water. But I think that the poignant remark of the evening was the straw. And they will probably be poking their straw down deeper. So I'd like some information brought forward about how we can protect existing well systems that are in place so we do not dry up that area. I know I think it was a few years back before the deluge happened, but I vaguely remember water being trucked up on Cole Road to help supplement the lack of dry wells or lack of water in dry wells in that area. And so water has always been a concern. This is not something that's new. And because of that, we should be careful in what we allow, what we approve. Access, water, and then basically sewer. Those are three major issues that we look at any time when we're looking at a project. And we want to ensure that those are in place and before we move forward on it. I agree with the conditional use permit and everything coming up through the commission only. Because things do change, and it gives more eyes, and it gives, the part I like about it is it gives the public access. So now the public can come in and they can give us their concerns, because there isn't really much of a reason for us to be up here except for us to listen to you and what your concerns are, so we can try to fold them into the project. So that I see that as my key job. All points are well taken. I've driven those roads back there in Aromas for many years. I just like doing day trips back there for some silly reason. And stop at Vertigo Coffee in San Juan and have a few sips and then go off into Aromas. Granted, it is a trying situation with traffic now. The economy's doing well. There's a hell of a lot more cars on the road now. I think everyone was just carpooling. And they don't have any incentive for that anymore. So please stay in touch with this commission as it moves on down the road. And express your concerns and bring your neighbors back. Let your neighbors know. Contact Daryl. Let him know what your concerns are, because if we get too far into the process, it's hard to implement anything later on. Right now, you're at the start, and this is when we need to address it. So thank you all for coming tonight. Thank you for your comments.
Any questions from staff?
Did you want to speak to the Highway 101 node as being included in this review or not? Or, excuse me,
101 livestock?
101 livestock. Did you want to give credence to the suggested shapes that were on the map? And then also we've had a speaker who says they're an adjacent landowner that would like to be considered in some manner.
Well, and that was already addressed, yes. I think we should. I think part of it, though, is vetting those parcels because of floodplain issues and stuff for Lavandino and see if it makes sense. So there's no sense in going back. We might as well do it now if there are more neighbors, and then vet them now, have the neighbors take a look at it, and then apply what's appropriate. 101 livestock was brought to my attention by one of the public, that even by us looking at that, because it wasn't involved in the general plan, could be a violation. So, the other thing is the owner of the property is also stating that he was very much involved in the project, and talking to, I guess, the GPAC. The question would be just how did he, and that's the problem with misunderstandings on this and owners. Did he misunderstand what was going on, or did it really happen? If it really happened and he's involved in it and he's part of the review process, then he should be part of this.
So let me try to clarify a little bit, Mr. Chair. That I think part of the source of the confusion is that where the area, there's the parcel where the use and the structures are at right now on livestock. Mm-hmm. That piece of property is zoned C2. I think it's C2 commercial. It's zoned commercial. I can't remember if it's C1 or C2 now. Right. And so I think that's part of the confusion. And Michael and I were talking about this a little bit earlier. Is that because that piece is already zoned commercial, there may have been some thought that it didn't need to be designated as a node per se, because part of that site's already designated commercial. So I think that's part of the source of the confusion, and staff will continue to try to tease that back. But I think it's important to clarify that there is commercial zoning on one piece of property there at livestock already.
Yes.
Even though it's not part of the node. So
that's understood. My concern is that in the general plan process, the EIR was able to cover that to be able to go to a CR rating, like was done on the other, areas. And if that's the case, and it was vetted in that way, then fine, let's just move forward. But if it was not, then now we're in violation, and I don't want to go to prison. That's not a nice place.
Yeah.
So through the chair, let me see if I can clarify where, this is a discussion item this night. We're not really asking for a decision, but I've heard some things that sound like they qualify as you'd really like to flesh out and know some of the information that are more like a performance standard, which is like, is our traffic movements going to be safe, or what would those be? Provision of water, and how can adjacent properties be protected if there's new water users? Mm-hmm. How will sewage be disposed of? And we've also heard that the existing general plan that was hoped to be relied on had looked at this in such a degree, and that the board in their action did adopt some statements of override, which kind of gives a clearance here, but yet it seems like you're wanting a more qualified answer on some of those three performance standards that might have a bearing on what eventual shape you would give or which location you would choose. Is that right?
I'm not understanding it the way you're addressing it. But.
Well, when you say there's water concerns and access concerns and sewage concerns, how would that have a bearing on your recommendation for the eventual shape of a CR zone? Some properties are going to say look good, or some are not for one of those three legs of the stool?
As far as the shape of the CR zone, the only concern I think we have to worry about primarily is scenic corridor view shed, floodplains, nature-sensitive areas, things like that. Any fishing game issues, the bigger picture things. Once we identify an area, basically then it's up to the planning group, to sort of say, okay, is this feasible? But I assume that they're going to be addressing those things anyway. That they're going to take a look. They're not going to open up a floodplain area and say, okay, that you can build here. And then sewer, water, all of those other elements, any landowner can come in and apply like anyone else, but they have to prove those things, just like any other project. So identifying the size, the only thing that I think we might want to do is, if the size looks like it's getting out of control and we're encroaching on our scenic areas too much, so we're joining up the CRs, then I think, like the Bettable Road one, if that's down low and it's blocked, like is a lot of tree, and maybe it doesn't hurt to do that. Maybe you don't want to do all of it. I think more it's like identifying an area, and then for us saying, okay, well, I think we've overstated this a little too much. Maybe we need to pull it back in a little bit and work with them that way. I see this as like a total discovery period where anything's open, and now after they bring forward, we see what the neighbor response is to the next one. We see if we can pull it back in a little if need be. But it may not. I mean, like Bettable is only one side of the road, and so is 129. So the only other issues and actually Rocks is only on one side of the road, and it's already stubbed out for its access. So then the 101 livestock is maybe an issue, and that would be traffic, and that would also be Caltrans saying they've got to bless it. So we're just starting. And we've got a lot to bring in and take a look at and vet and air to the public.
So if staff and the consultants proceeded with trying to flesh some of these things out with the designs and the geographical properties that you've seen on the screen tonight, that's the discussion you'd like us to bring back?
Sure.
You're not necessarily saying, hey, make sure the new zone goes on the other side of the road on these other properties.
No.
And I'm not hearing from you that you're saying any one of these should be overly reduced or changed in shape.
No, I think that comes in the discovery process. We're still on page one, and we have to take each page one at a time.
Thank you for your time.
Just when you want to end the meeting, right? Michael Groves again, just to add into what Tavin's asking about. I just want to be clear, it's kind of, again, just big picture for both the audience and for the Planning Commission. The general plan, if the general plan's at 10,000 feet, this is at 5,000 feet. So we're not at a project level. So a lot of the questions that are being asked about water, how this is going to get handled, aquifers, it's not going to get answered in the zoning, in doing a zoning. Zoning is implementation of the general plan. It's a state requirement that you implement your general plan with zoning. So that's what you're doing with regard to these nodes. Now, with that said, we're doing something pretty unique for the county, which is we're creating a zoning code that's going to have very specific boundaries and very specific themes and standards that are going to be specific to those sites. So can we be creative with those standards? Yeah. We can be creative in terms of, for example, the Livestock 101, which is a big concern. Can we be creative in terms of talking about a dude ranch and talking about the kinds of uses that are allowed there? And no, they can't just drop in a fast food, they can't drop in In-N-Out burger on the edge of the right in, right out, right? It's just, so those are the kind of things we can create or not create depending on how we do those standards. So what we want to bring back to you in January is those types of standards along with the uses so that you can see what we're talking about, and then we can have a further discussion. I think that's what Tavin was trying to get at in terms of the details that are going to come out of this, but also don't want to have your expectations be we're going to solve all the water problems and traffic problems by doing this process, because that's not going to happen.
No, I just aired that because I wanted the public to know that is part of the process. It's more, we don't just say, okay, fine, go ahead and go. We do vet them on water, access, sewer, all of that. It is project level, so it is lower down, down the road. But I want them to know, and I want the public to know that, yeah, we're very concerned about that stuff, and we're not just going to blow it off and let it in just for the commercial growth. It's going to have to stand the test.
Right, and so, and as you were speaking about it, Commissioner, it's exactly right in the sense that once the zoning's in place,
right,
then they'll have to bring you a project, and that project's going to have wastewater service, water service. It's going to have to prove it's not impacting the aquifer. It's going to have to show how its traffic is either working or not working, access in and out. All of those things will have to come back. So there's, again, 10,000, 5,000, and then there's ground level.
Yeah.
Okay, we're not at ground level. We're at 5,000. So there's some of that ground level information is what you'll get to. And so again, there was some discussion about one of the commenters made a comment about that the EIR for the general plan is a program level EIR. So it's a term that's used under the California Environmental Quality Act of a 10,000 foot level EIR. Although this EIR was fairly detailed. And so we will go back and look at the EIR and whether or not it did take into account Livestock 101. That's the bullseye on your question, is did the environmental analysis handle that in it or did not? So we'll go back and look at that. But basically the bottom line is a lot of those impact discussions will get taken care of as a part of the actual project level analysis. So when somebody asks, is it a program level analysis, the zoning is also done at a program level. It's not a project level. Mm-hmm. So again, it's 10,000, 5,000 feet versus ground level.
Right.
Okay.
So as you continue through this process, I bring up stuff like that on purpose because we're up here doing this all the time. We already pretty much know the drill, right? But for some of the people out there, this is the first time they've ever showed. They have no idea how we're talking, what we're talking, or anything else. So we need to continue with that 5,000, 10,000 project level and what the level entails.
Exactly.
Okay? So they have an understanding of what we're doing.
Right.
Okay?
So thank you. So thanks for
we get
bringing
better
it up.
questions, too. If they understand more, better questions.
Exactly. And then somebody asked about the coastal zone. I just wanted to say the project's not in the coastal zone. None of the areas in the coastal zone. Does the stream have downflow to the coastal zone?
Yeah.
Probably yes.
Yeah.
So, but the actual area is not in the Coastal Commission's purview.
We're a ways off, aren't we?
A little ways off.
Yeah, quite a ways, yeah.
We are, however, tributary, or we contribute water to the Monterey Bay.
Right.
And so we are of significance.
We do affect the coastal zone. Right.
Yes. Chair, may I make one mention? Commissioner Lowe also mentioned the Lavanino property that would that possible use of a greater part of it. The fact that 129 is so close to Beatable, I think that's probably why only that one section of their property was included, because you really don't see it yet when you're coming down from the Betabel area. And the other thing is that Betabella was significant in Victorian times as a resort. and that's why it still remains the resort name. And so I think that historic value is significant in the long run.
Yeah, the rail used to bring people down from San Francisco and drop them at the bank of the Pajaro River to sunbathe. How about that?
That's right.
Mm-hmm. Commissioner Lowe?
Michael, I have a question. Now, and you were talking about program EIRs and 10,000
Right.
feet. From what I got from that conversation is basically that we're saying at the program level, there will be total CEQA review then. Am I misunderstanding? Because earlier I thought there was some question about that.
What we're proposing currently is you have an existing general plan EIR that was thorough at a 10,000-foot level.
Okay.
We are proposing to write an addendum to that that would look at any issues that have come up that we might think are, additional issues, things that haven't been covered. Then we have to make a determination whether or not any of those additional issues are significant and can't be mitigated. And if there are significant issues that haven't been covered, then we might have to jump to another document, another level of a document, like a supplemental EIR or a subsequent EIR. We don't think we have to at this point, and we've taken the approach that an addendum will work because, again, it's state requirement to go from a general plan designation to a zoning designation. So that's the approach we've taken. We'll look at it as we go along, and we'll talk to you about it more when we get to the January meeting, because at that point we'll have written the code, we'll have had a chance to go back through the EIR, look at the 101 livestock issue, et cetera.
Okay. I'm not making my question clear.
Sorry.
I understand 10,000, 5,000 we're talking about,
Right.
still program. I am talking at actual project level.
Oh, okay.
So at project level, I'm assuming there will be more CEQA work to do.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. We're at a program level, if you want to use that term, program level, because it's used often. We're at a program level for both general plan and zoning. Once it goes to, let's say, a use permit in front of the Planning Commission to do something at one of these nodes, then it has its own all-new environmental document.
Okay.
And
Thank you.
Okay.
Any more questions from the commissioners?
I'm good.
Nope. We close number 3. Going to number 4. Any general plan discussions and update? Mr. Brown?
This was at the request of Commissioner Ray Pierce to add to the agenda.
Yeah, it's an old agenda item that's continued from agenda to agenda that was moved by commission. So it's mostly your time for you to talk to us about updates to the general plan, what's working with the general plan, or what you're working on in the general plan. And Pat?
I would really like to know where we are on actually getting zoning in line with the general plan. I know that's a very broad question, but could you give us some kind of update? Just
Sure, yeah. John Gurton, RMA Director. So as you heard, the commercial nodes, that is the work that's being done on general plan implementation right now. That's it. That's all that's being done on zoning.
We're at step 1.
Right.
And we have 25 more steps, 30 more. How far out are we? 2 years, 1 year, ballpark? Just give me a ballpark.
I can't answer that question. There's been a number of reports that have gone to the Board of Supervisors. Mr. Groves provided a memo within a month, I think, of adoption of the general plan with an
Will we have a
advice
general
on what
plan
it needed to
update
be.
before we have the zoning?
Yeah. Potentially, yeah. So, so the primary issue is that general plan implementation is a complex issue, and it requires a lot of staff time and a lot of work and expertise. And quite frankly, it's expertise that we don't have on in-house. in most cases. Not only that, but we don't have adequate staffing to keep current with our current planning projects. And I think you guys deal with that on a monthly basis, and you deal with that with complaints from applicants on how long it takes us to get projects through the process in this county. Now, I will say that I believe that over the last year we've made significant strides in improving the planning process and getting projects through faster. That we still have a lot of work to do. But to do any real substantive general plan implementation will require outside consultants such as EMC to help with that. And I'm now the third director I know of who has made that pitch to the Board of Supervisors. And as of this budget, we haven't received a budget allocation for that. So the general plan implementation that we do is this. It's a case-by-case situation where if we have staff time and there's an application that comes in that requires that we address general plan implementation, and we're able to do that, we're doing that. Or in this case, you have property owners who are willing to chip in order to help speed up the process for their own interests. But also in the interest of the county, and help us with funding the general plan implementation. So it's really catch as catch can at this point.
Thank you.
So I guess my appeal to you would be, talk to your supervisors and help us with getting the resources we need to do the general plan implementation.
Read my mind. What I was going to ask you, is there anything we can do to help encourage the way I see it, it's like if you want to increase money into the general fund, there's two ways you can do it. One is you can hire more assessors and reassess property in a more timely manner. Mm-hmm. And the other one is hire more planners, because those projects end up bringing in more general fund monies as well. So if you'd like a formal letter from this commission and everyone's in favor of doing that, or from to Tavin to put it in our behalf, or you
please
put it in on our behalf, saying that we our consensus that says we do need more staffing and we need it yesterday. Just say the word.
All right. Well, I don't want to lay all this on the Board of Supervisors. We've made strides just in the short time that I've been here. We've reviewed and improved our fee ordinance, which hadn't been done for a long time, and so we were really behind the times in what we were charging for our fees and for our staff time. So that'll help. That'll help with staffing issues. And ironically, the commercial nodes and some of this general plan implementation, like you said, will help bring in the revenues that we need in order to. Yeah. So it's kind of the cart and the horse issue.
And that's why these were addressed first.
Right.
They see them blatantly as income issues.
Right.
That they can have more income into the general fund. But we also have a lot of other cleanups that need to be done too. Urban service area needs to be tightened or loosened, and it's not just that. There's several others.
Yeah.
I mean, we talked about it with the group after we passed it, saying there was some need to clean up the document and flesh out zoning and land use. We have some zoning we don't even have descriptions for.
Right.
It's just crazy.
It is, and actually, Mr. Kinnison Brown and myself had a conversation about this 10 months ago about some of the problems that we were going to have going forward with a general plan that wasn't implemented and a zoning ordinance that's not consistent with our general plan. So we do need to address this.
Yeah, and through the chair and with your permission, John, if I could just editorialize for a moment. I've worked in another jurisdiction where they too did not follow through after their general plan with the zoning change. And we had realtors and we had people investing in property just looking at the zoning, because they forget about the general plan, but the general plan had a different allowance, like single family, where someone looked at a multifamily zoning, and so they bought a property, think they can get 6 units, but the general plan only said 1. But where I'm going at with that is by us not funding and putting the money in to have our zoning consistent with the general plan. Not only is it counter to state law and practices, but it puts the burden back to every one of the property owners. And the way we hear about it is the property owner that is ready to invest and make improvements in their property. It's that person we hear it from, not the person that's sleepy and just leaving at their home and they like everything the way it is. It's the person that's trying to invest and make improvements in their property, say it's out of whack, and it's on you to fix it for your property so your property can be consistent. So it's a real hard place to be as a planner, just having that conversation. And it's avoidable by planning ahead with proper implementation.
And now you make improvements to the property is now reassessed at a higher value, and you have income.
The state has more income, though. Anyway, done? All done? You got any more questions, or you got any more answers?
I guess my only question is this really something that we want to talk about every month, or maybe quarterly?
The reason I put this on as a continuing item, thinking that the squeaky wheel would get the grease, and it keeps getting left off, so it never got tested very well on being squeaky. So, yeah, really, I would like to. I mean, that's what we motioned at the time for, but at the time we were also expecting this to actually be beneficial to the process. I don't know. What do you think? It has value being on at least quarterly to talk about deficiencies or what the commission can do? Part of the thing that I was thinking of is some of these elements go to supervisors. Is there stuff that can be actually started out of the planning commission level that addresses certain items that we see, like fleshing out some of those, land uses and zonings, and direct staff? Then it goes to the supervisors for approval, saying that planning commission is giving us these directions. We need your approval to move forward. So I'm just trying to give you more tools for your toolbox.
All right, I appreciate that. So I just thinking off the top of my head here, maybe you give us a few months to go back and reestablish the list. Tavin's done significant work on this in the past, and put together a general plan implementation plan. We're going to plan a general plan implementation plan, and we can bite it off in chunks. We have significant work on that, but I think maybe wrapping that into a larger presentation for you all on what we're dealing with from a workload perspective and a staffing perspective, and by then we'll have a better idea of what our new fee revenues look like and what we think we can do with some of those revenues, and present that to you all and talk about what would be your priorities for us to focus on in general plan implementation. And then I can use that as a jumping off point to take that to the Board of Supervisors then, and maybe have a more specific dialed in plan, and that they can take in chunks and not see such a big impact
Small
to the general
bites.
plan.
That's how you eat an elephant, small bites.
Small bites, that's right.
I think that's a great idea.
So
I think as part of that, too, you should probably work on implementation of some kind of an educational thing on basic stuff like Brown Act and other issues, because Pat's chair is going to be open, so that's going to have a new one in there. This could be open, and Valerie could probably benefit. She's new to the commission. So the training the commissioners to get along down the road a little further with some of the learning process would be good for, say, next year sometime. It doesn't have to be a big deal. It could be just little segments of presentation on different things.
That's certainly within our capacity, and maybe after, the rotation and the assignment, if planning seats change, that's something we, just like we do with the planning calendar, when are we going to meet over the next year? We just have regular items where we take refreshers, if you would. Land use 101, just so we hear those things again. And
yeah, that's
within
great
our
idea, 'cause
capacity.
This is good good for the commission, it's good for staff also. And
Yeah.
it helped. I think it's good for us to have a dialogue on how that interaction works better, because I know in the short time I've been here, there's been tension.
Nah.
No.
Nah, I
I
haven't
was
seen
somewhere
it.
else.
Seen it,
No,
yeah.
no.
Yeah.
So they also used
I'm flashing back to a cannabis discussion when
There
I
you
first
go.
got here.
There you go. So you shouldn't smoke before you go into the presentations.
But it's
So-
legal now.
Ah, you should have had the brownie instead.
So they also, I think when I was on City Planning Commission, they had in Monterey, they had some kind of a planning commission, sort of a workshop.
Retreat kind of thing.
Yeah, it was like a 2-day thing, and it was only about planning.
Right.
And they even had first year, all the way through the whole gambit. Do they still offer things like that around? And is there anything scheduled that's at least close to San Benito County?
I don't know off the top of my head, but we
Okay.
can find out. Yeah.
Okay, because that really helped a lot when I went to work at the city for that. So yeah,
Great.
Okay. And we appreciate you. Thank you, John.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, everyone knows your name.
Well, that was for the people who might still be listening.
Okay, we're all done.
We done?
Do you
We
have a
can
motion?
we can move to adjourn.
Yeah.
I move that we adjourn.
I second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you all for your time. Sorry to take out your beer break or your PD time or whatever.
Now, somebody gave me the ring. It was fun.
Do you work with other Pasadena and or are you all over the state?
Well, I do work from remotely generally. I'm part of an application.
For what?
Well, I'm going to be. Thank you so much. It was so nice to meet you.
I do not expect to see it.
To what? Okay. Needs to get done. It does need to get done. No, the implementation stuff needs to get done.
But yeah, if I ever get it online.